I had another lost civilization with a session I had where it was the same way. It was the men, again, were misusing the powers of nature. And usually when they're doing this, they're working with crystals. Now, crystals have a great deal of power, and they've told me that we don't even know the power that the crystals have. We have just barely tapped into it. And it is so powerful that they had learned how to control these. And they said eventually we may be able to get this knowledge back. First, we have to be sure, they have to be sure if we can handle it this time around, because it is so powerful it's gotten out of control too many times. But usually it's the use of crystals. So in this one session, the men were using the power of the crystals and trying all kinds of things with it, and they began directing it not only into the earth, but also into the atmosphere. And it sounds very familiar with what they're doing now, because it began to destroy the ozone layer and began to make a hole in the ozone layer. Now, many times when I'm doing my work, they're telling me, you must have this information because it is repeating itself now. And that's why we want you to know. Maybe you can realize what you're doing and we can stop it before it goes too far. But in that session, they were directing it up into the sky, and the power was so great it was burning a hole into the atmosphere. And they said allowing the sun to come through, which it normally wouldn't have done. And there was also in that session a group of women who were trying to counteract the negativity with the powers of their mind in a positive way. What happened was that it burst through the hole in the ozone layer, and when the intense heat came through, it burnt everything, destroyed the whole civilization, all the people, and they told me this was what created the deserts in like Africa, like the Gobi Desert and the Sahara Desert. These were created by this intense heat that came through and burned everything. And in that session, it was interesting, as the woman was dying, leaving the body, she said, we must go to sleep for a while. And I thought naturally she was talking about the death process. But she said, no, the power was too great. The power has to go to sleep. Meant that they could not have it back for a while. We would have to go to sleep for a while. So that when she did come back into the next life, it was a very mundane existence in the Middle East somewhere, where it was totally different. They had no power, no abilities, nothing at all. But she said we had to start all over again because we could not have that power back again. So that was another example of the civilizations have been lost and destroyed in many different ways. Another session that I had, this is in Convoluted 2, was a group of just ordinary, I don't want to call them natives because they were more advanced than that. They did have a very primitive civilization, villages, and they had animals, nature-type civilization, and they were developing along that way. There may have been other parts of the world that had higher civilizations, but this one was focused on this simple one. And the man, there was something that would resemble a UFO. It was a huge spacecraft, landed outside of the village, and they told everyone to come out. And they said, go to the other villages and get as many people as you can and to meet them there. And, of course, they were frightened, but they did what they were told, and they gathered as many people as they could together. And they said, bring your animals too. And they took them on board the spacecraft. And those that wanted to go, went with their animals. And it sounds very much like the story of Noah's Ark. But what happened, they said they knew something was going to happen because they could feel it. But they took them on board the spaceship and went up. And from that position, this one that I was speaking to in the regression, he was looking out the window of the spacecraft, and they were showing him what was happening on Earth below. All of a sudden, there were gigantic explosions, like, it's very similar to like A-bombs going off all over the entire planet. Of course, they weren't A-bombs, but it was like everything was exploding. The volcanoes, everything was happening at once. And fire and smoke spread over the entire planet as they watched it. And it was total, everything was burned. But then, as they watched, now this took about 2 days from their position in space. As they watched, they saw the planet was charred and it was totally black, and then green began to come back. And it gradually began to spread over the surface of the Earth as they watched it.